Why have I, bought a van and why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities, and it's going to be really an amazing experience, and I look forward to you joining me on the jar. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Mental Health Today. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. I'm also the founder and creator of the JAR Foundation, as well as the JAR podcast, which you just saw me kind of doing the voiceover as they were preparing my van for a trip around the country. I'm in Topeka, Kansas right now. I'm on city number 70 something, I think 76 or 77. I've interviewed about 250 people and spent really a long time with folks face to face talking about life stuff. And the surprising common thread around the country has been mental health. So I've been really blown away by the crisis and the impact it's had on people, and the very real touching stories that I've heard of the struggles to get through the system, to find help, and to get it addressed in a real, an easy way, or at least a way that's a lot simpler than what we've got set up now. So in that idea is why I started the JAR Foundation and started this podcast, is to bring on professionals in the space who have some ideas, who are working on things, who have a different view, and just want to share their ideas on what they're looking at. And this is a great place, good, safe place, a great place for people to share those ideas and share their opinions about what's going on and how we can do better. And we've got Dr. Mahsa today. This morning, I should say. And thank you for joining us from California, Doctor. And you've got a really cool backstory, which I encourage people to go seek out, because you've like I said, you got a really cool backstory. But even more important now is what you're doing now and the impact I think you can bring to the table. Doctor, again, thanks for being a guest. And why don't you share with the audience a little bit about yourself and then how you're in this space and what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this show. Hello to you and your listeners. Yes, I'm very honored to be here and to be a part of this podcast with you. I am from Iran. I migrated here about over 20 years ago, and I really wanted to acknowledge the plight of my people and what they're going through now.
Yeah.
It's something to look at, and I always want to represent them. But now I'm a co-founder of Heal and Thrive Psychotherapy and Coaching. It's a family business. It's my husband and I and a few different good friends. We started this private practice in essence after I had my daughter and I left the county. So my background is I've worked in jail, DCFS, which is children's services, mental health communities, with those who are engaged in life of crime, addiction. But then I had my daughter and I needed to move on to a more secure had interesting life.
Yeah, that's definitely time to dial it down, because also that's tough, right? You're really seeing some difficult human stories there. That's hard to do that and then go home to a baby and be pure.
Absolutely. And I have to say that training ground was so essential in who I am today and what I can do for my clients. In Heal and Thrive, we truly believe in changing a person's personality, to releasing them from the past, what I call shackles. Because when you heal from those experiences that are holding you hostage, you find that you're capable of things you never imagined. I never knew, right? And we find this new journey, this flourishing that is unbelievable. I mean, when they say human mind has that is not using all of its capacity, I've seen it. I've seen people transform in ways that I could never imagine. And that's what Heal and Thrive is about.
Beautiful. We talked earlier about you had some three ideas you wanted to share. Maybe you want to go through those?
Sure.
How you went? Yeah.
I guess the first thing that I really want to comment on is this concept of social media and social media therapy. I think it's an amazing movement that mental health is being talked about,
Yes.
concepts are being addressed, it is being explored, and introduction is being made. I think the problem is that a lot of people take, and I'm seeing it in through my clients, right? They take these little tidbits of information and transform them into their own understanding of therapy. And all we use these words with their, like, they call empathy empath. And those two words mean something very different. Having, an empathy towards someone is like caring and attentive and attuned, where an empath could mean being a psychic. So they are not the same words. Or the concept of inner child, right? This conversation consistently about what is inner child. Yes, inner child is the child you once were that represents and exists within you. But it's a part of the personality, it's one of the three pieces of the personality. So if you think of us as the child we once were, the parent, adult, caregiver, teachers, whoever that taught us, that we had teaching us our moral values, our expectations of ourselves and others, and ourselves, the adult, the one that is supposed to create a balance between these two, that is the personality. The idea of personality is the interplay of these different forces, the primitive urges, the morality conscience, and then the balancing that is created through what we call the ego. Not that I have a big ego, but the ego as in like the balancing factor.
Yeah.
A lot of us are stuck in these two pieces. Super judgmental, super rigid, everybody has to have this unbelievable expectations, unachievable expectations, or in some ways, quote unquote, immature, or impulsive, or reactive. The reality is that they're just different parts of us. Everyone has it. What hasn't grown in that person is the ability to coordinate and manage these two pieces, to create this referee, this balance. Yes, I hear you, little one. Yes, appreciate your, expectations, big one. But here's what we're going to bring these two together and mold it.
I love that idea. This like the referee inside your head.
Yes, which creates this sense of calm and peace. Instead of bouncing between I'm impulsive to how dare you.
Yes.
It's okay you're impulsive. I get it. Yes, sometimes we feel that way. That was really good point you mentioned. But here is this self-compassion. Christina Neff talks a lot about self-compassion. This idea of having compassion and care for ourselves. Yes. For me, is being able to bring those two and balancing them to achieve peace.
Especially the inner peace. Yeah, and I agree that the social media stuff, it's the hot button right now. I mean, mental health is a hot button, and there's a million apps. Even my sleep app now is a mental health device. Apparently white noise is a mental health treatment.
And it's very true, right? We have a lot of tools and techniques to help us, and they're so necessary and so important. Even with the AI coming up, right? It's such a good tool. But what I want us to remember is that we cannot forget the value of human relationship and the art of therapy. The models, the techniques, the different, procedures and programs and tools and apps are all essential and helpful. But they are only tools that are applied to a specific population and need.
Yes, agree.
Who has, I had someone reach out to me and say, well, this person just saw their fiance die right in front of them. Can they come to you? My first response was actually no. I said, I will definitely work with this person, but this person needs EMDR. They need medication and EMDR to help calm the brain down, to be able to get through the crisis of that moment. Because the work I'm going to do, which is to help them process their grief and make sense of what happened and create this cohesive narrative of what happened, can only happen when that brain is calmed down. Now, on the other hand, you have someone that has been going to therapy, has done a lot of self-growth, and is doing very well, but they feel like they just need that extra step. That's where I step in. Because what I do is that I dig in for that root cause, and I can only do that when the person is stable, right?
Yes. Yeah, of course.
I can get you to the place you never knew existed. See, the thing is that a lot of what we're doing and experiencing has a connection to the past. What I say to clients is that when you come in, we create this shared space. You bring your expertise, I bring my expertise. In this collaborative environment, we together put in the pieces of the puzzle together. So I say, I'm going to give you this insight. I'm very psychodynamic oriented. So I say, I'm going to give you this insight and say the picture I'm seeing based on the pieces you give me. And you tell me yes or no.
Okay.
It's the most amazing thing, I have to tell you, Ken, that I'm sitting with a client, we're having a conversation, and it's almost like I'm seeing what they're seeing. I'm like, I can feel this emotion, like this word that is coming up, and I'm like, this is not a word I would use. Like,
yes.
I'm like, this word keeps coming to mind, and I would not use that. And the person looks at me like taken back and is like, that's what I was thinking.
That's my word. Yeah, that's my word.
And I'm not psychic, right? I'm no disrespect to anybody who believes in that, but I'm not sure about that field. I haven't studied it, so I'm not gonna put that title on me. But what I do know is that we have these mirroring neurons.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that's.
And then people, we have this polyvagal theory that the way we're sitting and the way we're engaging, we can feel each other.
Yes.
I really believe that in that connection, in that environment, that containing environment, that safest space they have with me, they project to me what they cannot tolerate, which then I can bring into the session and say, okay, I'm holding on to this for you. Let's look at it.
Memory. Do you feel you can feel what the part that they're trying to give up?
Absolutely. What they cannot feel, they give me.
Yes.
All of a sudden I get choked up. And I'm like, it's like I'm crying for
yeah, like
and they're like, yeah, you probably are.
Yeah.
We talk about it, but like, okay, where is this coming from?
Okay.
This specific memory. But the thing is, when you go to the past, you remember what you experienced in that moment. You take this episodic memory, right? You take this.
Yeah. You get these Polaroid videos. Yeah, very weird memory stuff.
Exactly. But the thing is that all of these memories have a connection. Now, thanks to all that I went through in my life, especially with my clients, I got to see so much through their lens. I got to see so much suffering. And it had a scar. I actually have a little bit of PTSD because of it.
Yes.
But I also saw so many patterns. That as I'm sitting with people and they're giving me these pieces, those patterns are coming for me because people told me. And I had my gang members talk about it and tell me, well, this is what I went through and that was going on. Well, what was that like? What was that like? So I have all of these kind of like pictures of patterns of things that happens to people. And so all of a sudden I'm like, what happened to your mom? What happened to your dad? Tell me about their stories. And you see this intergenerational transmission of trauma.
So tough, right?
Which unlocks the person. That's the piece I love the most, because by the time we look all the way back to their history and understand the life their family was seeing and living that was different than theirs, these people become free of that chain. Because they finally realize, oh, when my mom was like screaming at me, don't leave the house, she was talking about the life she was living and how dangerous outside was, but it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And it allows them to grieve what they lost. And as they grieve what they lost, then they get a chance to feel what they didn't get to feel, be held in the ways that they didn't get to be held, be contained and understood in the ways that they couldn't, and have a narrative or understanding in a way that was not possible for them before.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And then there comes empathy. It's interesting that when the anger is expressed, there is this piece of empathy for the person.
Yeah, they had even themselves, right? They even find it for the people that hurt them.
Yes.
Because they understand why. And then then it comes into themselves. So cool.
And it's not a defensive empathy, right? I often hear people at the start of the program when we are working, they say, well, my parents did the best they could. I said, absolutely, 100% hands down. But it doesn't mean that you didn't get hurt. And then they sit back and I'm like, there is no judgment. I'm a parent. I mess up all the time.
Yeah.
Amen
to that. Amen to that.
It's that we're doing the best we can, but that doesn't mean we don't leave a scar.
We don't leave a scar.
And that's when I talk about the repair, right? And, when I work with parents, I talk about the repair. Yes, you lost it. Yes, you yelled at your kid. Mm-hmm. How are you going to repair that so they don't have to do it years later with me? It's all about that relationship.
Yeah. It's interesting what you describe. It's like so many of the stories that I've heard are follow this pattern. When the people who are healed, or at least at a place on the road of healing, right? This journey, but they've started it. A lot of that is, I'd say a lot of it, probably all of those do have this moment where they've reflected, they've done the work, they've looked back and like, this is what happened to me. This is why it happened. This is my parents' story. Yeah. And you're right. So what you're saying is totally, I've experienced it where people say, I now know what my mom and dad went through now. I understand that. And the cool part is when people stop the cycle.
Yes.
Right. They're like, I'm not going to be like my kids I'm protecting my child. I raise my children like this. And they're like, I'm not going to be the one letting this keep going. It's intergenerational and they stop it. It's so cool.
Because now they understand.
Yeah.
We repeat patterns when we don't know where they're coming from.
Which is crazy, right? You just keep doing something, but you don't know why.
Absolutely. Because, like I have this client, right? She was frightened about moving out. She was frightened about living her life. She was frightened about doing anything because she had this parent that had horrifying, abusive childhood, horrible environment. And this parent was always afraid. So would have instilled in her that she was incapable of living and taking the steps. When I walked her through the parent's experience, and I said, if I were your parent, I would have understood.
Yeah, same.
And she did too. She's like, I can see why my father is afraid because of what he went through.
Yeah.
And I said, he's looking at you through his eyes and the life he lived. And that was the moment she was just like, oh.
It all makes sense.
Then I was like, do you live that life? She's like, no. I said, do you have those threats? She said, no. I said, do you have those problems? No. Like, then live your life.
Yeah, live your life.
And then she was consumed with sadness for him. Like the anger and rage turned into sadness. Like, I'm so sad for my dad. And I said, yes.
Yeah.
You doing the work he didn't get to do.
And you're having to do it because he didn't do it.
Absolutely. And I said, it kind of starts with you.
Yeah. And maybe you can get the dad in there and heal the dad.
And it happens. I cannot explain it. I'm sorry. I don't know if you guys hear in background noise. For some reason, all of a sudden, all the cars are passing by my house for the first time. But the families start to change.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can explain it in some ways, but it just always takes me like, I'm now in shock. As one person becomes healthier in a better way, not in a kind of like abrupt way, the family starts to switch too. It's almost like this, it just passes on. And then all of a sudden, you're seeing the family members are also repeating what the client is saying, acting in the same ways. It's fabulous to watch.
It's beautiful. The healing stuff. What else we talked a little bit about the social media stuff. I was cracking up when you were talking about the medium, right? Talking about the medium. What else? There's a couple. What other idea? I forget the other two.
I think one of them was inner child that we talked about.
Yeah, let's talk. I hear a lot about inner child. Even one of my questions from the jar says, "What would your inner child need to hear from you?" So I have no idea what the hell it is. It's somehow I wrote the questions with inner child. Tell us what it really means. What does it mean, and how do you talk to it, and how do you work with it?
So think of your inner child as your most vulnerable, most sensitive, alone and abandoned parts of you.
Okay.
Inner child is the child you were at the moment of trauma. And trauma can be humongous, like abuse, or it could be just dismissal. But it's that feeling of vulnerability and loneliness, that pain. And what it does is that it gets us stuck. You may have inner childs of many ages, many moments. Okay. And what we do is that we walk away from it. We further abandon it. And it shows itself up, right? I feel like I have this vulnerable, very childlike, very sensitive, very fearful inner child. And then I have this very rageful teenager that is just like super angry. And then I feel like at some points I have this feeling of incompetent parent to those two.
Goodness. What a relationship you've got going on in your head.
Absolutely. And it's constantly working with these three. I remember at some point in my life, I could hear my teen screaming at me, what a bad parent I was to my inner child. And I had to really work on that. I had to really stop and say, okay, I really do need to recognize that very vulnerable side of me, while at the same time appreciating that anger, that survival.
Yeah.
Right? We have all of these pieces in us. When we think about that, when you have that strong emotion, when your nervous system goes into effect, when sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system gets on, the limbic system, something is triggered. There's a neurological, biological explanation, but there's a psychological piece too, right? There's that the perception of threat has to do with a memory. If it's not a bear coming at us and we're acting as if, when it's perceived as a threat, and when was that a threat? Because at some point, somebody coming at you at way meant something dangerous. It doesn't today, but that's that inner child screaming.
Yes.
It's when you turn inward and say, hey, you're okay. I'm here. I got this. You're not two anymore. You know, this person isn't coming at you trying to hurt you. I got it. And if they do, I'll punch them back. Don't really become aggressive. But you reassure the inner child.
Yeah, you can reassure.
Right? I'm not violent. I play with that word. But it's kind of like step in front of it, right?
Yeah, stepping in.
Right? I'm kind of appalled by aggression, and I've seen it a lot in my life because of the work I've done. So I have learned to use fantasy, right? Fantasy is a very strong thing because I always talk to my clients about anger versus fantasy. In fantasy, you can do whatever.
Yes.
long as you do not turn it into reality. Now, you have to know the client, the capacity for them to be able to tell the difference. But I had this woman that was
Yes.
so paralyzed by her fear because she was sexually abused. And we got it back to the memory, and the memory was this man came at her in a closet and she was a little kid. And I said, as an adult in fantasy, step into that room. You're not going to do any of the things you're thinking of, but you can play around with it in fantasy.
Yeah.
And she went in and she beat the person out. She came out and was like, am I a bad person? I was like, are you ever going to do that? She's like, no.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
I said, you cannot put hands on anyone. You cannot hurt anyone. You are a human being, and those are behaviors no matter what you're responsible for. But you're allowed to protect your inner child.
And come to the defense of the inner child so they know. So cool that you can do that in your mind and you can calm that memory.
Yes, because
can't make it go away, but you can calm it, or at least give that inner child
peace.
The comfort. Peace, peace. So cool.
See, the reason we allow aggression in fantasy, because that inner child is primitive as well. All this complex cortical cortex work we do, well, I'm gonna not let that happen, doesn't hit that midbrain.
Yeah.
So using fantasy and aggressive urges versus pleasure-seeking urges meets the child where the child is at.
So funny. I would never think that. Right, that the child is over there waiting to kick some ass and do some violent stuff to protect itself. Right, it's waiting for you to come rescue it.
Yes, in a way that the child understands.
Yeah, and especially maybe that child.
Yes,
because each person would have a different, your different life experience. Fascinating. We're doing good. We got a few minutes before I'd ask for closing thoughts. So, what else you want to cover?
I guess it's okay if you don't mind. I'll talk about Heal and Thrive and our practice.
I'd love to. Yeah, tell us about what you're doing and how people get in touch with you and all that good stuff.
So, Heal and Thrive psychotherapy and coaching is the idea of these words really have a meaning. The healing is the part that I do, the psychotherapy, that really getting at the root cause of the problem. Like everything we've been talking about, right? It's about what causes this problem versus the symptoms we're seeing. And really after the bacteria, and so forth. The thriving is the ADHD coach and the life coaching that we do. So we kind of have combined these two practices. People get their insight and knowledge and learn about themselves. And then they get to put it in practice in real life, what it means to them in practice. Now, what are they going to do differently based on goals and ideas? And that's the thrive part that comes into play. My husband is an ADHD coach. We have life coaches. We have other therapists. We have different modalities that we use. But that's the concept, that when you bring these two together, every case formulation is individualized. Ruza and I really, if we're working with the same client, we come from these two different perspectives.
Yeah, very different.
And create this new kind of way of treating the family, the person, the individual, the environment. I'm a social worker, right? My PhD is in social work.
Yeah.
I look at the whole world and its impact on that one individual. And that's the different lens, right? It's not just you, but you, your family, the people, the teachers, the schools, the community, the world that you live in that causes your problems, the interplay of all of those things. So when I bring up these insights, Ruth turns them into actionable behaviors.
Okay.
So you can find us on heal-thrive.com. We have Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those things that you can learn more about us. We do offer consultation. And I ask your listeners if they're ready to change their lives, to unlock their unknown potential, they should definitely reach out.
Yeah. I'm such a fan of root cause. As we talked earlier, it's probably my corporate career would have been defined by root cause. And it's the most painful path. It's the most difficult one. It's the most arduous. But it gets results in the end.
Yes, it does.
It gets results in the end. It gets permanent results. I think the thing is, once you uncover the root cause, you make change.
Yes.
You make real change. And I think it's the kind of stuff that I really look for. I think it's and I love the idea that you put these two together and then even include the whole environment, because every story I've heard is not about the individual wakes up one day and has a mental health crisis, right? I mean, you just don't, we're born beautiful and innocent and clean, and all right, we may have some memories from previous lives or whatever you might believe around that, but we're born pretty innocent and pure, and stuff happens. and the mind is complicated. The human mind is super complicated, and I think it lies to us, right? It lies to us. We lie to ourselves, and somewhere in there, man, taking that spaghetti mess and making something out of it and showing people the path. And what you're doing is beautiful.
I think we have to lie to ourselves, right? We are survivors.
Yes.
We tend to survive. And sometimes
Yes.
the environment that causes us to survive in that way doesn't save us, doesn't help us. Do we have?
Yes.
Can I give an example?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so true, right? It's so true what you just said.
Like I worked with a lot of people who had life of crime. And at
Yeah.
first I was like, I've never lived that kind of a life. So I would come in and be like, well, you need to be this, you need to be that. And then they sat me down and they told me about their lives. And I said, okay, thank you for so much
You
for
went,
that.
you went, okay.
You can survive that. I can't.
Yes.
The conversation changed, right? So I said, in your world, which is, I don't know, 10 blocks away, the way you lived made sense because I wouldn't have
Yes.
survived it.
Yes.
But in my world, that way doesn't make sense. So I always use my migration, right? And I said, you're immigrating within your country. You're living one way of living and
Yeah.
you learn my way of living because the rules are different here. It's the same in our past and present. We survived because of these defense mechanisms that helped us survive.
Yes.
Now, how do we appreciate them and put them to rest?
Yeah, give them the space that they deserve.
And then say, thank you so much. I don't need you anymore. Now I need to go and find out what I'm meant to do. And that's where that freedom, relief, and truly flourishing happens.
The real flourishing. Doctor, how about some closing thoughts? I mean, this has been I've already learned a little bit. Very interesting, especially your guys' approach, you and your husband's approach to therapy. Very interesting. How about some closing thoughts? Any other messages you want to impart?
I think the most important thing is that for everyone to realize, one, they are worthy no matter what. No matter what.
Yes.
They have a right and are deserving to live a life full of happiness.
Yes.
And that they can. Right? If we understand what kind of influences our behaviors, what is the core at our core that is make us do what we do, and if we find out if it's really our passion or not, then we can understand it, grieve it, put it aside, and go after what we really want. Have the life that we deserve.
Yeah.
Don't settle for what is. Right? If you're successful, if you're happy, things are good. That's not enough because there can be so much more.
And it even can be more. I love it. You're worthy. You deserve it, and it's possible to get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what a great message. Thanks again, doctor, for sharing your story and sharing, how you look at therapy and approach it. I think very interesting. And I'm sure, and boy, I'd love to meet you when I make it to California. I'm on my way, slowly but surely. That would be amazing. I'd love to hear your stories just about some of your social work when you first started out, because
absolutely,
that part of it's fascinating to me.
Oh, thank you. Definitely, we'll do dinner or something.
Yeah.
Come on over food. So absolutely, come on over. I'll make you dinner.
We'll get some Iranian. If I can get some Iranian dishes, that sounds great. Thanks everybody for listening and supporting the JAR Foundation, the Mental Health Today show. Please do make comments and do share this, and look out for this episode with Dr. Mahsa. It'll be coming out in about 2 weeks on audio version, which is a little bit easier to listen to and to catch up to. Thanks again, doctor, and I'll see you. Just hang around. I'll be right back. I'll see you in 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, loose, baby.
We're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals at Public Glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glass blowing. Yeah, we're going to go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change.